Hello, everyone. It is Saturday, April 30th, 10:29 a.m. And I want to just give kinds of a forerunner, an introduction, if you will, to the next, I don't know how many videos, probably maybe 10, probably a 10-part series on the topic of a deeper look into the plagues of Egypt. So I want to give kinds of the introduction. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I do all these videos in my free time. And I want to make sure I do a really good job on this because there's a lot of information that I feel is helpful to us today. And the reason why I feel the need to talk about it, other than that, is because there's a lot of Protestants and non-religious that, non-Catholics definitely, that cover topics that we're going to be talking about within these plagues that give a very anti-Catholic bias in when they're presenting their research and their information. And it's sad because, so like for me, I talk, if you want to go back and watch my testimony, I talk about how when I first had kinds of like the spiritual awakening that like demons were real and all this stuff, the advice that I was trying to follow and the information I was coming across in my, my hunt for the truth, seeking out the truth of what was happening to me, was mostly anti-Catholic resources. And so for whatever reason, that's just out there more than I wish I had come across some good Catholic information. And so I guess this is my way of trying to remedy that problem, even though I'm just one small voice. But a lot of things that I was reading, such, for example, I'm going to talk about Bill Cooper in here, author of Behold a Pale Horse. He has a lot of really good research, but he's also very anti-Catholic. And I feel like in a lot of ways, people like him and information such as that really did a lot to delay my full reversion, me fully embracing Catholicism. And it's a problem, especially in America. It's a problem. And souls are being lost over it. So this is just me trying to remedy that, as doing what I can, trying to do my part. So I'm just it's going to take me a while because there's a lot of research and I want to really do a good job where I write everything down first and kind of just do it structured and read from my notes, not kind of ranting like I'm doing right now. So I'm very excited for this new video series. I will begin recording and publishing to the playlist entitled A Deeper Look at the 10 Plagues of Egypt. So there will be a playlist on YouTube and on my website, joanavarkmedia.com. In this series, I hope to accomplish the following, other than what I've already said. To shed light on Exodus 12:12, which states that God chose these certain plagues, in part to execute judgment on the gods of Egypt, so that, as he tells us in Exodus 7, all Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. I would like to show who these gods were that the pagan Egyptians were worshiping and how each plague corresponded to the cult of that god, aka demon. And so I really want to show why God was so intent on punishing the false gods and what we can learn from that. I would also like to show how these demons have made a comeback and been popularized in recent times. This is very important. I would like to show how each plague in Egypt also corresponds to a punishment in the book of Revelation, aka the book of the Apocalypse. Very important because the concepts and the punishments are the same. Maybe it's just the players that are a little bit different. Most importantly, though, I would like to encourage Catholics to not be afraid when these things come to pass, because we are given the solutions and the protection, just as the Israelites were in ancient Egypt. So when going through this series, I think it's important to keep a few things in mind and to kind of note the following. This is from Britannica. Egypt had one of the largest and most complex pantheons of gods of any civilization in the ancient world. So it's extraordinarily important that the plagues of Egypt are in part due to this. Egypt had one of the largest and most complex pantheons of gods of any civilization in the ancient world. Over the course of Egyptian history, hundreds of gods and goddesses were worshipped. The characteristics of individual gods could be hard to pin down. Most had a principal association, for example, with the sun or the underworld in form, but these could change over time as gods rose and fell in importance and evolved in ways that corresponded to developments in Egyptian society. And so it's important to know, obviously, when God Almighty speaks, he completely is the opposites of these evolving, fickle gods. He says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I do not change. I am the same. Whereas paganism, the concepts and the foundations, in a lot of times the methodology, the methods stay the same, but the names that are given, and even a little bit of the appearance changes over time. The importance changes over time. So for example, if they were having trouble with maybe the Nile being dry one year, maybe a new god would develop to combat that. And so it's this constant changing. So it's hard to pin down. Paganism is hard to pin down for this reason. And that's just the slippery serpent. That's how he operates. He operates in the shadows. He's elusive. That's just a mark of Satan. So I would like to point out that the same can be said today with our neo-pagan culture. And I want to read again from Britannica on what exactly is neo-paganism, the religion of neo-paganism, because it is a religion. And it is dominating all our structures right now. So neo-paganism, any of several spiritual movements that attempt to revive the ancient polytheistic religions of Europe and the Middle East. These movements have a close relationship to ritual magic and modern witchcraft. Neo-paganism differs from them, however, in striving to revive authentic pantheons and rituals of ancient cultures, though often in deliberately eclectic and reconstructionist ways, and by a particularly contemplative and celebrative attitude. Sorry, that's a tongue twister. Typically people with romantic feelings toward nature and deep ecological concerns, neo-pagans center their dramatic and colorful rituals around the changes of the seasons and the personification of nature as full of divine life, as well as the holy days and motifs of the religions by which their own groups are inspired. Modern neo-paganism has roots in the 19th century Romanticism and activities inspired by it, such as the British Order of Druids, which, however, claims an older lineage, sometimes associated with extreme nationalism. And so I have pointed this out. This is very important. So a lot of times we think of paganism as being on the far left of the political spectrum, so to speak, with one world government and all these things. But there's a faction of it that is also on the extreme right. And you can think of, Hitler would personify this. Extreme nationalism at the cost even of trying to extinguish whole races of people. And so that would be the right side of it. So we have this extreme right and this extreme left. So today we see this playing out nowhere as clearer as Ukraine and Russia. And I have talked about this. I'm not going to get on a big tangent about it, but Ukraine would signify the New World Order, the left, and all the trash that goes along with that. And then Russia in paganism. And then Russia would signify their version of paganism, which I've talked about. Go back and watch my videos on Russia, in the nationalists, the right side of it. And it's the same bird, just two different wings of the same bird, as they say, right? So we have to understand that, because it's very easy to get caught in a trap of siding with one or the other. But we can't side with either. As Christians, we really can't. And it's no coincidence that the Russian Orthodox Church has incorporated a lot of this naturalistic paganism in it. So anyway, sometimes associated with extreme nationalism, pagan groups and sentiments were known in Europe before World War II, but contemporary neo-paganism is for the most part a product of the 1960s, influenced by the works of the psychiatrist Carl Jung, who was totally demonically inspired and probably possessed, by the way, and the writer Robert Graves. Neo-paganists are more interested in nature and archetypal psychology than in nationalism, but we can't exactly say that anymore because there's an emergence of this far right paganism that is interested in nationalism. Neo-Paganism in the post-war decades has flourished, particularly in the United States and the United Kingdom and in Scandinavia. Some of the major neo-pagan groups are the Church of All Worlds, the largest of all the pagan movements, which centers on worship of the earth, Mother Goddess, Phaerophyria, based on ancient Greek religion, and also centered on goddess worship, pagan way, a natural religion centered on goddess worship and the seasons. The Reformed Druids of North America, the Church of the Eternal Source, which has revived ancient Egyptian religion, and the Viking Brotherhood, which celebrates Norse rites. Beginning in the late 1970s, some feminists open to feminine personifications of the deity became interested in witchcraft and neo-paganism. And so what I want you to understand is this always leads back to human sacrifice, whether that's in the form of war or abortion. Always. Today, that's how it would come about. Now, obviously, back in the day, it was them throwing people into volcanoes or whatever they did. But today, it's still coming back to, it's still human sacrifice is a product of it. It just doesn't look like us throwing people in the volcanoes. It looks like abortion and war. So I want to point that out. Back to my notes. So as you can see, the pagan culture is still to this day developing, but at the core, the concepts are the same. So it might be, listen, Padre Pio, I think it was him who said, if the demons were to appear physically, there's so many of them that they would blot out the sun. So just because one demon, falls or whatever, there's one right behind them ready to take his place, but it's all the same satanic source. And I want to stress something. Very, very much right now. The groups primarily responsible for bringing about an environment conducive to this reemergence of paganism are the free Masonic secret societies, which I also hope to point out in this series. On this note, I encourage you all to look into joining the Militia of the Immaculata, which I did a video on, which is an apostasy started by St. Maximilian Kolbe to combat this very problem. And so, on the Freemasons and things, it's so important that we understand this. I can't stress enough how important it is that we understand this. And I can't stress enough that just because they don't have a set of uniform doctrines like, say, the Catholic Church has, their methods all resemble each other. So whether it be, even within the lodges, there isn't like a uniform code of conduct or a uniform, there's different lodges over in Europe and things like that, which I hope to get into. But it's all the same source, which is satanic. And it's important for us to understand this because I forget where I was going with that. But, that's one reason why it's so hard to fight against. Because it's not like it's not Catholicism. So it's easy to see if somebody is trying to throw Catholicism on you because we have very clear identifiers. We're very much out in the open, whereas these people operate in the shadows. And it's just more, it's like poison. It just seeps into institutions and just completely ruins them. So we see this really playing out in our school systems right now with gender ideology confusion and all this stuff. It's all paganism. And I want to read to you one last thing to keep in mind before we start on this series. And why I'm doing this series is because we're at a point now where in the end times, it's going to be this reemergence on a level never seen. So in the ancient days, the Egyptians had their own cult of worship or whatever. Then there was the Roman Empire. It's not a coincidence, by the way, that Christ set up his church in the middle of the world power of the pagan Roman Empire. It's not a coincidence at all. That was done specifically because this battle has been going on since the garden. And I don't understand why people don't understand that. This is a battle. We are at war. So anyway, this battle was started in the garden. He sets up his church in Rome, the middle of the Roman Empire, right? And the church defeats paganism, Roman paganism. So in the end of times, we're going to see this universal. And I don't mean universal whereas everybody is technically worshiping the same thing. I mean universal as in a global paganism in whatever form. It's enslaving the Christians. So we are the ancient Israelites. We are the Catholics, especially. We are the new people of God after Christ came into the world. And so the plagues of Egypt are replayed really in the book of Revelation in a future time where the Christians are enslaved by the pagan world order, as I refer to it. And so we shouldn't be afraid. Just like the Israelites had the blood of the lamb, literally the lamb that they slayed, over their door, which protected them from the angel of death, we know that what we have, and I'll get into all that in this series, we have Christ's actual blood, the real lamb, the ultimate sacrifice. So anyway, I think that's all. Oh, I'm reading that article and then I'm going to leave it off for the day. Look for this series. Like I said, I don't know how long it's going to take me. I want to do a good job. There's so much information out there. There's so much information that is specific to America even. Like America, it's wild when you start really understanding things and looking at places like Washington, D.C. and understanding like, oh boy, this is, it's very eye-opening. So I want to do a good job, and I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I want to leave off with this article about what a neo-pagan society looks like, and you can compare it to what we have going on today. All right, so this article is entitled, it was written on September 30th, 2019 by bigthink.com. Could Neo-Paganism be the new religion of America? So the key takeaways is at the top says, as Americans turn away from organized religion, pagan spiritualities gain popularity and visibility. Although it isn't a homogenized religion, groups identifying with neo-paganism share some uniting principles. Witchcraft, which is traditionally associated with women, finds strength in new life and feminist movements. The witch is impossible to ignore. Pop into an Urban Outfitters and you're sure to find an array of tarot card packs, a beginner's guide to crystals, and a spell book or two. Over at Barnes & Noble, Aaron Murphy's Hiscock book, The Green Witch, is among many witchy books being marketed to young women. On Instagram, a popular Witches of Instagram hashtag is now widely used. In the account, The Hood Witch has a following on the platform of 434,000 followers. Although neo-pagan or contemporary pagan beliefs have steadily gained popularity since their introduction in the 1960s, the past few years have seen neo-paganism and Wiccan beliefs proliferate in mainstream American culture. While reports tell us that organized religion is going extinct in the United States, the rise in neo-pagan spiritualities suggests there might be more to the story of religion's role in Americans' lives. According to previous research, this probably isn't just a fleeting New Age aesthetic trend. Running 3 large comprehensive religious surveys from 1990 to 2008, Connecticut's Trinity College found that the religion of Wicca grew a considerable amount over that period of time. Picking up the baton on this effort, the Pew Research Center found that 0.4% of Americans identify as neo-pagan, which is around 1 to 1.5 million citizens. As neo-paganism draws more attention and its associated symbols become marketable, there's a strong case to be made for recognizing the practice as a legitimate spirituality and understanding more than just its sensationalized aspects like spell casting, herbal charms, and divination techniques. Neo-paganism has proved difficult to define as it is anything but a homogeneous religion. Groups vary in size, structure, purpose, orientation, and ritual practices. Although the subgroup of neo-pagans that practice the craft, or Wicca, and call themselves witches have attracted a majority of pop culture attention. It's important to understand that not all neo-pagans consider themselves witches. In addition to Wiccans, neo-paganism includes groups such as Druids, goddess worshippers, heathens, and shamans. Although it's difficult to make generalized statements about neo-pagan practitioners, given the lack of central leadership and dogma, there are a few uniting principles. The central underpinning belief that unifies the varied groups is a deep reverence for nature. Often, neo-pagans adhere to animistic beliefs or the notion that inanimate objects such as trees, plants, animals, and natural phenomena are imbued with a living soul. Consistent with the view that all of the natural world is alive, neo-pagans revere the earth as a living being. Traditionally, neo-pagans follow a wheel of the year calendar with holy days or Sabbats that harmonize practitioners with seasonal cycles of the earth. Additionally, neo-pagans have also follow a cosmology that understands the universe as an interconnected whole. All beings are linked with the cosmos as part of a unified living organism. Extending off of the neo-pagan theme, of which interconnected universe is a magical worldview, which is most pronounced in Wiccan branches. In short, neo-pagans believe in a universe in which each part of the interconnected cosmos affects every other part. So many neo-pagans believe that magic can be used as an instrument to tap into and influence these links in the universe to bring about some shift in the physical world. Although there is no single deity or pantheon of deities that neo-pagan groups all worship, the immanence of a divine presence that both permeates the natural world and transcends it is typically accepted within neo-pagan groups. While neo-pagans usually worship both a masculine and a feminine divine, according to Don Carpenter, many practitioners put a special emphasis on the concept of the goddess or the divine feminine as a metaphor for the divine. Given the intellectualization of the world and the advances of modern science, it might seem a bit counterintuitive for magical and animistic rituals to suddenly draw in followers. If a sky god was beginning to seem a bit far-fetched, how is the sacred in the soil any more appealing? Neo-paganism might well be a reaction against what Max Weber referred to as the disenchantment of the world, whereby modern life and scientific advancement have drained a sense of the sacred from our lives. And I wouldn't even say that. How about Protestantism? Was the first step in that direction, at least in from the conception of America, right? There is no secret. Like it's devoid of all that is sacred. It's not a mass. There's no incense. You know what I mean? Anyway, neo-paganism's use of occult practices reveals sacred, even supernatural interactions with others in nature, such as birds, rocks, trees, or possibly spirits. This might be something Americans, particularly young people, are craving. Yeah, because the Christianity that they see is going to a church that looks like a warehouse and being yelled at by a preacher. Like, that's what they see as Christianity in America. At a time when industrialization, toxic consumerism, and environmental destruction seem to be reaching an apocalyptic crescendo, Americans may also view neo-paganism as a sort of spiritual activism by drawing on a sacred ecology that seeks to bring a divine found in the earth itself into the lives of practitioners. Through a worldview that finds the sacred in the natural material world, neo-pagans notice, ritualize, and imagine magical interconnections between multi-species lives. There is also the tremendous power of the feminist movement. Its rejection of institutionalized patriarchal religions might account for the specific cultural interest in the Wiccan branch of neo-paganism. By embracing and sacralizing a symbol of an evil, feminized other that we were warned of, scholar Howard Edberg Schwartz calls the tradition of American witchcraft and neo-paganism an aim at debunking the otherness of others. According to the influential Wiccan priestess Starhawk, and this is also why you see a lot of gays like as warlocks and things like that. According to the influential Wiccan priestess Starhawk, reclaiming the word witch is to reclaim a woman's right to be powerful and to celebrate aspects of the divine that have been traditionally associated with the feminine, such as creativity, mystery, emotion, natural cycles, and regenerative powers. Rising from 17th century ashes and strutting into mainstream American culture, today's witch is an increasingly visible member of society who might be found sipping coffee out of a witch's brew mug, flipping through a spell book, and tending to an herbal garden. What is deemed holy reflects the highest values of a society. Ultimately, the rising practice of American neo-pagan spirituality asks us to consider what changes in cultural values occur when the sacred is found in the earth, symbolized by a Greek goddess. And that wasn't even the one I was thinking of. That was also a good one. The one I was thinking of, I had thought I had saved and I didn't. Let me try to find that real quick. But I wanted to point out the link there between. It's anyway. All right, I promise this is the last one I'm going to read. And this is the HuffPost. Now, this is all mainstream. There's New York Times articles you could find all about paganism and how it's reemerging. So this is from activist blogger John Halstead. And it's titled, "We're Not All Witches, An Introduction to Neo-Paganism." And so he says this: Wiccans, witches, and pagans, oh my. Wicca is one form of contemporary witchcraft, and witchcraft is just one form of paganism. Wicca is one tradition of pagan witchcraft, which was founded by Gerald Gardner in the 1950s. Other traditions of pagan witchcraft include fairy witchcraft, an ecstatic form of witchcraft founded by Victor Anderson in the 1950s, and Dianic witchcraft, a feminist form of witchcraft founded by somebody Budapest in the 70s. Witchcraft is just one path within paganism. Other pagan paths include Druidry, shamanism, ceremonial magic, Reconstructionism, polytheism, heathenry, animism, and others. There are also pagans who do not follow any of these paths, for whom paganism is its own path. These pagans are sometimes called eclectic pagans or neo-pagans to distinguish them from more traditional or retrospective forms of paganism. So neo-paganism is a modern religion with ancient roots. Neo-paganism differs from Wicca in a number of ways. Unlike Wicca, which arose out of post-war England and was heavily influenced by Western esotericism, neo-paganism is more a product of the 60s American counterculture and the feminist and environmentalist movements of the 70s. Dennis Carpenter describes neo-paganism as a synthesis of historical inspiration and present-day creativity. It is difficult to generalize about neo-pagans. There is no central neo-pagan authority, and neo-pagans tend to be suspicious of institutions generally. The majority of neo-pagans in the U.S. practice alone and do not belong to any pagan group. In spite of this, the website adherence.com reports that neo-pagans as a whole have a remarkably cohesive, identifiable culture and generally shared value set, even more so than religions such as Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, which when taken as a whole. Below are some of the values which are common among neo-pagans. 1. Life-affirming. Neo-paganism is a life-affirming religion. Neo-pagans seek to live life as an end in itself. For them, the meaning of life is not to be found in another world or a future existence. This world is neither fallen nor a prison from which we must escape. Neo-pagans strive to live in the here and now. 2, it's a nature religion. Neo-paganism is a nature religion. Neo-pagans perceive nature as both sacred and interconnected. Nature, including its human and other than human inhabitants, has intrinsic value to the neo-pagan. Neo-pagans perceive that we are immersed in a vast web of life, which is our true community. Many neo-pagans are active in environmentalism. 3. Re-Enchanting of the world. Neo-pagans feel that human beings have become tragically disconnected from the natural world and our natural selves as a result of the desacralization of nature. The result of this disconnection is social alienation and injustice, patriarchalism, personal anomie, and neurosis, and environmental discretion. Neo-pagans seek to heal this rift by reconnecting with the sacred dimension of nature. This is sometimes referred to as re-enchanting the world. 4. Pantheism. Many neo-pagans are pantheistic. They experience divinity not as something outside of us, but as something we are a part of. Neo-pagans perceive a deeper, as opposed to a higher, power, which is present in nature, in our own selves, and in our process of our lives. They seek to live in accordance with this deeper sacred dimension. 5. The divine feminine. Neo-pagans perceive a divinity which both manifests through and transcends gender. Bingo! Transgender movements. To the extent that they acknowledge a male aspect of divinity, Neo-pagans also acknowledge a female aspect, often called simply the goddess. Neo-pagan women exercise religious power equally with men, which is another reason why we have to have a male priesthood, in my opinion, to directly combat this. Goddess is change. Neo-pagans perceive the essential nature of the cosmos, including divinity, the world, and ourselves, to be change. They also perceive that the changing cosmos follows a pattern, one that is cyclical, represented visually by a circle or a spiral. This is reflected in the changing of the seasons, the movement of the sun, the changing face of the moon, the human life cycle, and the ebb and flow of our lives. And this, in and of itself, is not opposed to Christianity. The difference is we believe that there's a great orchestrator of that, whereas they don't. Like, the creation and the creator are not one and the same. 7. Gods and myths. Neo-pagans have a sophisticated understanding of the importance and function of myth in human life and of the nature of the gods of mythology. They may worship or honor one or more gods from ancient myth or even modern gods of their own imaginations. Often these gods take the form of psychological archetypes like the dying and rising god, the horn god, or the triple moon goddess. Some neo-pagans honor an inanimate great goddess of nature or the earth, sometimes called Gaia, and a male god who complements this great goddess. Neo-pagans have different beliefs about nature of the gods. For some, the gods are literal beings, while for others they are Jungian archetypes or metaphors or natural processes in human experiences. 8. Intentional ritual. Neo-pagans strive to attune themselves to the rhythms of nature and to root themselves in the present place and time. One way they do this is by celebrating the turning of the seasons and the solar solstices and equinoxes, called the Wheel of the Year. Samhain, which will be celebrated on October 31st, falls approximately halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. Neo-pagans create their own rituals in order to relate their experiences and their lives to the larger cycle of life and to re-enchant the world. And that's why it's so important that we as Catholics are aware of this, so we can increase our prayers on their days to combat this. Darkness and death. While Neo-Paganism is a life-affirming religion, Neo-Pagans recognize that death is a part of life. Nature is both beautiful and savage. Neo-Pagans perceive that pain and suffering are an inevitable part of the cycle of life. They embrace darkness and death as a natural part of the life cycle. They seek rest, wholeness, wisdom, and spiritual power in the dark half of the cycle. Neo-pagans are eclectic and non-traditional. They seek life-affirming symbols and teachings from both modern and ancient religion traditions to enhance the religious practices. Neo-pagans honor the essential diversity of nature and life and eschew sexism, racism, homophobia, and other forms of intolerance. Neo-pagans are pluralists and tolerant of others' beliefs, but they are also selective in choosing what works for them personally. Wow, sounds like our culture, doesn't it? Neo-pagans reject all claims to absolute truth and oppose all those who seek to deny the freedom of others to believe or practice their religion as they will. Okay, freedom of religion. Anyway, neo-pagans hold these things to be sacred. All life, the earth, nature, our bodies, and all living beings. They experience the body and the earth as sources of wisdom to which we should listen. Neo-pagans experience embodied life as good and believe that the essential aspects of life should be enjoyed. They do not attach guilt or shame to sexual desire or consensual sexual activity. And we will see the ultimate fulfillment of this with this pedophilia that they're trying to legalize. So that's where this goes. That's the end of the road, just so you know. At the same time, they condemn vulgar commercialization of sexuality and the objectification of women's bodies. So you have it. That's just my introduction for this series. I wanted to set the groundwork. I want everybody to understand what we're up against, what we're facing, and the historical precedents for what happens when this emerges and takes over in accordance with Scripture. So I hope y'all have a blessed day. Look for my videos. The first one will be on the Nile turning into blood. Joan of Arc Media out.